Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome CNP member Colin Hanna.
Well, good morning and welcome to the CNP Board of Governors brunch. We have a wonderful agenda for you this morning. The Board of Governors brunch is comprised of the members of the Board of Governors level of CNP, that level between regular membership and the Gold Circle, and members of the Gold Circle, and CNP's new members. When you join CNP, you get invited to the Board of Governors lunch once. Then you get the opportunity to become a Board of Governors meeting and come to the Board of Governors lunch every time, or a Gold Circle. So we're delighted to have you all here. We'd like to begin with an invocation. That's entirely the right way for CNP to begin its programs. We are seeking God's blessing on our meeting and on our land, and to give us our invocation, Robert Alt from the Buckeye Institute. Robert is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Buckeye. He earned his law degree from one of the finest law schools in the country, the University of Chicago Law School. After that, he clerked for Judge Alice Batchelder, who is wonderful in her own right, on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit, and also served in the Heritage Foundation's Center for Legal and Judicial Studies under our great friend who is with us this morning, former U.S. Attorney General Edwin Meese. Robert and his wife, Rebecca, live in Ohio. Please welcome Robert Alt for our invocation.
Thank you, Colin. You know, it's tough to follow someone with Colin's booming voice. As I was reflecting on today's invocation, it struck me that we have so much for which to be thankful. For me personally, I'm thankful for the remarkable fortune I had in spending the formative years of my career working for Ed Meese. We should all be thankful for Ed Meese. Amen. His contribution to the rule of law and to advancing America's constitutional principles cannot easily be measured, which is why I'm thankful that President Trump is attempting to find an appropriate measure for the enormous contribution Mr. Meese has made to this great country. Which is why, as some of you know, this coming Tuesday, the President of the United States, in the Oval Office, will be bestowing the nation's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, onto our dear friend, Ed Meese. I think it's fair to say no one is more deserving of this honor. Now let us pray using the beautiful words of a prayer my wife, Rebecca, wrote some years ago. O God, we invoke your continued blessing today upon our exceptional country. Instruct those who exercise lawful authority so that they may administer the affairs of state reflectively, with wisdom and integrity, that peace and security, happiness and prosperity, justice and liberty may forever abide in our midst. Banish vice from our hearts and safeguard virtue in our lives as we aspire to uphold the ideals upon which our great nation was founded. Unite our citizens, and may this land, under your providence, be an influence for good throughout the world. May our homes be kept safe and our cities and countrysides renewed in beauty and order. Protect with your almighty hand the warriors who valiantly guard our freedom in dangerous places near and far. Grant them the courage and resolve they need to execute their missions while enduring separation from loved ones and the familiar comforts of home. Shield them from the enemy and extend to them a true sense of your presence. remember the hardworking men and women whose labor gave us this program, this hospitality, and these meals this weekend. The excellent CNP staff, capably led by Bill Walton, and the indispensable Bob McEwen. Bestow special grace on each of us this morning so that together we may proceed to reflect light everywhere we go and in everything we do. We stand humbly before you, asking these things in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Robert. And thank you, Rebecca, for writing that. That's lovely. All right, I would now like to introduce you. I need your attention, please. I'd now like to introduce you to our new members, and I will read their names and invite them to stand so that you can take a look at them and then connect with them as the weekend goes on. To make it easier to recognize new members, for one meeting, they have a CNP badge which is blue in color. So when you see somebody over the weekend with a blue badge, please go out of your way to welcome them to CNP and tell them what a remarkable family we are. Let's begin alphabetically with Gary Annunziata and his wife, Jean. Gary? Ileana Cataldo. Melissa Emery. There's Melissa. Ken Harrison and his wife, Eliette. Eaton Hopkins and his son, Eaton. Mark Meckler and his wife, Patty. Mark Nuttall. What a joy it is to have Mark with us. Tom Phillips and his wife, Ouida. Christine Soule. Glenn Story. Is Glenn here? Glenn. Mark Stuhlreier and his wife, Jennifer. And finally, Donald Sweeting and his wife, Christina. We welcome you all to CNP. What a remarkable group this is that you have joined, and how much better it is now that you have joined. Welcome indeed. Well, it's my great pleasure now to introduce you to Attorney General Jeff Landry of the great state of Louisiana. And before I get into the prepared remarks, point out to you that something that the Attorney General will address in a few moments is the fact that just this morning, the Supreme Court granted certiorari for a case, an abortion case from the state of Louisiana. This man is on the front lines of some of the great battles of our country. Jeff Landry became Louisiana's Attorney General on January 11th, 2016. During his time in office, he has helped reform Louisiana's Department of Justice. I can imagine that was quite a task. Recognized for his leadership, Attorney General Landry was chosen as president of the Bipartisan National Association of Attorneys General. Prior to his election, he served as a member of Congress representing Louisiana's 3rd District. During that time, he was responsible for one of my all-time favorite lines from a member of Congress. He was appearing before the Wyrick Lunch, chaired by our good friend Morton Blackwell, and he stood before us and said, you know, Congress has gotten such a bad reputation that when I go home on recess, I've taken to calling myself a lawyer. He has also owned and operated a successful oil and gas environmental service company, served as a police officer and a sheriff's deputy, and a member of the Louisiana National Guard. He and his wife Sharon have a son, JT, and they live in Acadiana. Please welcome Attorney General Jeff Landry.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Collins. It is true. Congress's reputation is so bad that it's worse than lawyers. I don't know that much has really, unfortunately, changed in that scenario. And what a great group we have here today. I got to tell you, normally I'm not real nervous, but in this group I kind of am. I mean, you got Martin Blackwell, and then of course you got General Meese. You got Leo Leonard here. I mean, gee whiz, I am really under the gun. I hope they're not grading my papers today. But it is. I'm very excited to let you know. I can't tell you, just to give you a little bit of background about me. My mother has been a pro-life activist her entire life. I grew up in that type of household, and when I was in Congress, when I was in college, and when I was working, she'd call me up and she'd say, "I need you to give $50 to the pro-life group." And I'd say, "Okay, Ma, $50?" She says, "Yeah, if you can go out and cruise around and party with your friends, you can put $50 a month in this deal." "Yes, Mom, that's what we're going to do." And of course, I grew up my dad hated politicians and lawyers. So I had a tough road to hoe. So when I got to Congress, I made sure that we tried to make him proud. And I'm proud to say when I left the 112th Congress, which included a great class of some of the most esteemed members who have gone on to do great things, the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Mick Mulvaney, Tom Graves, Jeff Duncan, the list actually goes on and on. I left there ranked by National Journal as the third most conservative member of the House. Of course, when I got home, my dad wanted to know who was first and second. But I am excited about what the Supreme Court, before I get to what I really want to talk to you all about, I'm just so excited about what happened today. The court actually granted cert on a case that is going to prove that conservatives care about the health care of women, and that the hypocrisy of abortion law, which places the killing of innocent over the health of the mother, should come to an end, right? And we got a bonus. We actually got a bonus. We got a bonus. So in that, we actually had asked the court to grant in a cross motion the issue of standing, and they did. And of course, for the lawyers in here, y'all may understand the impact that has. For the layman, like my dad would say, the rest of us, it means that, the court, it's interesting because the federal courts, and especially the U.S. Supreme Court, have always been very strict in who they allow before the court. Standing has been paramount. But yet in abortion cases, they have kind of just historically not been as strict. And that's a problem. It's a problem we have in this country because we're not enforcing the rule of law equitably across the board. And so by taking up our cross motion for standing, before the court is going to be whether or not the parties that come before the court are the ones that are actually aggrieved. And if the answer to that is yes, it is going to be great. Why? Because when you don't have the proper party before the court, you end up with bad law. And that's what we had here. So I got to tell you, it's great. I've got a great Solicitor General, Liz Muro. She is a warrior. Believe you me, I'm just a guy with the title and has to go around knocking on doors. I've got a staff that does an exceptional job. Liz Muro is going to argue this case. Sitting next to her is going to be Katrina Jackson, the young black female legislator from Louisiana, a Democrat, by the way, who authored the law, right? I mean, this is going to be great. I'm telling you, it's going to be great. Going to be great. So look, I have consistently fought for federalism, staunchly defended pro-life. I'm a pro-business guy. I believe in the individual. I absolutely subscribe that as government expands, liberty contracts. And so, I was asked the other day to talk about the role of government, because I'm a limited government kind of guy. And I broke it down as a little country boy should, is playing football, right? So when we were young and we were kids and you went into the neighborhood and you played football in the yard, you really didn't need a referee, right? You could pretty much play and everybody kind of adhered. You could kind of make up the rules a little bit, but everybody understood the basic rules. But of course, as you got into organized sports, into high school, into college, and into the professional level, the stakes get higher. And it requires you to have a referee on the field. Now, we don't need 50 refs, right? And we don't need refs that change the rule midstream or change the goalposts or move the sidelines. But we need a certain amount of refs to keep a balance on the field because the stakes are higher. And that's kind of how I view government's limited role to an extent. And so I asked what y'all would like to talk about today, because I don't want to come and talk to y'all about something y'all don't want to hear about. And I was told that many of you may be interested in what's going on in the big tech arena. And based upon the audience, I'm real interested. I want to try to wrap it up so we can have some real good discussion. I want to hear some questions and comments about this. You know, I'm concerned about big tech. And so I'm going to try to give you a little summary and kind of a scenario about what I see is going on. Because a lot of it, I think, affects the First Amendment. And I mean, that is a paramount amendment. So I have a question for you. Let me take you back to before radio and television, when print media, right? When there really was a New York Times, right? You know, when paper reigned supreme and people got their information from print. Imagine if one person or company had been able to buy up all of the manufacturers of print ink. And then they went out and they bought up all of the manufacturers of the paper that printing presses used. Would the government have stepped in? I don't know, maybe not there yet. But then if they would have then bought all of the manufacturing centers that actually built printing presses, would we have allowed that? And would we have said that was a problem? I mean, because think of that supply chain is a supply chain for information, for debate, for freedom. Would we have allowed that? Well, I would tell you that today, that's really the path that we're on. You see, the conduct that we've seen amongst the big tech when it comes to content suppression, to psychological manipulation, to predatory advertising is problematic. And the reason it's problematic, so I'll give you an example. In print and in television and in radio, if you were in business and you were very successful and you wanted to advertise in radio, television, or print, you go out and you buy up advertising. The more successful are, the more advertising you can buy, right? That's how it's supposed to work. That's capitalism, free enterprise at its best. And those radio stations and those television stations, and then, of course, always think about this in the political context as well, because it's one and the same. So you get advertising dollars, you spend, you got a great message. Those radio stations, televisions, and print have to tell you, have to sign affidavits that say that your content was put up before this audience at this particular time. So you know that your message is being penetrated. And also the pricing is very transparent. You know, I can spend more than my competitor. If he can't spend as much as me, I can get my message loud and clear. I want you to know that it does not exist on the digital side. There is no transparency, none whatsoever. Google controls 98% of it. And not only that, so here's the problem. Suppose Google doesn't like Jeff Landry because he's a conservative, or somebody inside of Google. And I'm in the business, and maybe I support the president, and they don't like that. And so I go to purchase digital online advertising. They have the ability to drive the price of my advertising up without me knowing it. They can also credit my competitor and give them Google credits that would allow my competitor to compete with me on the same playing field. When that competitor might not be spending that amount of money, they might like that competitor because that competitor does not like the president. Now think about it again in a political context. We send them, you advertise. You don't know whether you're reaching the audience. They send you reports and they say, trust me. Right? And they can give you a report that is legit, that, hey, listen, you got this many clicks, but they could be sending those clicks to bots. And so it's problematic. It's problematic because what it does is it creates an unplaying level field. It makes it such that they get to pick winners and losers. They get to decide who wins based upon advertisement. They get to push the products they want. They get to manipulate you. They can, and think of kids. Think of young kids. Think of college kids. They have the ability to say, a college kid wants to look for a red dress. And then they brag about this. They have the ability because they know so much about us, so much data that they're mining from us. They can literally send a person looking for a nice red dress, and when they're finished, they're buying a blue one. You hear what I'm saying? Again, think about it in the political context. The internet was said to be revolutionary because it enhanced and expanded human contact, a place for ideas and conversations to take place. It was a virtual public square, a place that people could find infinite amounts of information on particular subject matters. And it enhanced the exchange of ideas and the freedom to efficiently and effectively publish content. And I'm going to submit to you that if we don't do something, and I don't know what that is exactly, then that dream will die. It will die. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to lay that out before you. And I look forward to getting some comments from y'all, to have a discussion over the course of the next 7 minutes that they gave me. To find out exactly how we go about keeping America free. Thank you so very much.
So the General will take some questions over, as he put it, the next 6 minutes and 42 seconds as we wait for Steve Scalise. So please raise your hand, do a concise question, and the General will try to give you a concise answer. We got a microphone there. Steve DeCastro has mic.
Great.
So if you want to speak, raise your hand so the mic comes to you.
And do I get to keep talking until Steve gets here, because he's notoriously late? Oh, you see it?
Floyd, Big
Oh,
Floyd.
Big Floyd. Okay, there you go.
Thank you. I just want to echo some of your comments about Google. Actually, the freedom has already died. Google has such market power, such unbelievable control over advertising. The internet is not free, and messages are not getting through. And I just thank you for what you're doing to continue to talk about this. I was in Google News for over 10 years. I published westernjournal.com. And in 2016, we had over 1 billion page views. The day Donald Trump was elected, everything online changed. Big tech wants to defeat Donald Trump. And I just want to know, what are we going to do between now and the election to make sure that big tech doesn't defeat Donald Trump?
You know, it's a great question. I have been kind of sounding alarm on that. I've spoken to people at high levels of our government. Here's a question. If Google pushes my content more than yours, and let's say they give me Google bucks to do so, that's an in-kind donation, right? And of course, it's a prohibited donation because they're a corporation, if we're federal candidates. And so, I really would hope that the FEC would weigh in. They should have I think that those violations have already occurred on not only Google's platform, but others as well, primarily Facebook's. And because again, or if they take my content down. So in radio, if as a federal candidate, when I was a federal candidate, I think even at the state level, you have to give equal time, right? So if they take my content down because it doesn't meet their policy, shouldn't they be forced to take my competitors' time down as well? Right? These are questions that have to be answered. So that's what I think we should be doing. We should be investigating that.
So I am concerned about big tech, but anytime government tells me, hey, we're going to regulate something so everything's going to be okay, it sends shivers down my spine. And we might have folks in control right now that we like, but if we set a precedent that the government controls the flow of information, I'm very concerned about that. And I would be more in favor of seeing consumer remedies where you guys pass legislation or Congress passes legislation where we can sue, have standing to sue these big tech companies for these things as opposed to having government intervene. What's your opinion on that?
Amen. Amen. No, and I'll tell you, you're exactly right. It's what keeps me up at night because unfortunately, ignorance is bliss sometimes, right? Unfortunately, I've seen way too much. And so the information that I'm seeing is coming in conflict with a lot of my core beliefs about how government should operate. But again, when you have big tech operating, they're literally operating like a shadow government, okay? Really and truly. And so you're right. I mean, if we took away, and I used to remember the federal statute, we granted them immunity from lawsuits, okay? Now look, I'm not big about suing people either. Okay, so it's another part of my nightmare. You feel me? You understand why I've lost like 10 pounds? And I can't sleep. But literally, you're right. The courts would absolutely fix this. And so we could encourage our members of Congress to take away that immunity, and I think a lot of that would help. There we go. Oh, yes.
I was going to ask that very question. I appreciate what you've done on Google and all the state attorney generals. But one option with not only Google but Facebook and all these people is they have told the consumers they're going to treat them a certain way, and they're not treating them. They're engaging in consumer fraud against people, and I wonder if the state attorney generals couldn't bring those lawsuits in their own state on behalf of their citizens.
Those are things that we're absolutely looking at as well. We believed, whether right or wrong, that trying to find a consensus among as many state attorneys general as possible on both sides of the aisle. I mean, look, I sat in a room with attorneys generals whose ideology is completely opposite of mine, and when we're both agreeing, again, I have trouble sleeping at night. But I'll tell you this: what I have found is what I believe exists in all humans. There's an instinctive fabric, a DNA in us that screams out for liberty and freedom. And I believe that we know, we have a sense, it's like a sixth sense of when that liberty and freedom is getting ready to be extinguished. And so what I saw in the eyes and the conduct of some of my fellow attorney generals on the other side was exactly that as well. It was odd. But you're right. We're going to have to attack this at a multitude of levels. And we're trying. Look, I started ringing these alarm bells about 18 months ago. The Texas Attorney General, who runs like the 800-pound gorilla in the AG world, is squarely on board. Ken Paxton's a great guy. That has helped us. I think we're getting there. But by all means, we want ideas and we need help.
Mr. Attorney General, the concern I think many of us have, obviously, about a collaboration among 49 attorney generals is what are they all agreeing on? What does the other side know about what you're doing that you don't, that makes them pursue this? But secondarily, though, and probably more importantly, is the collusion between the left-wing attorney generals targeting the president, targeting federalism, undermining any efforts to deregulate at the federal level. Could you describe the current state of the political battles at the state attorney general level, where the left has focused greatly on it? We've stepped up a little bit in terms of collaboration, but the evil action is going on the other side, and how that can be constrained. In many ways, they're very dangerous positions when misused, and what do we need to do to change that?
So, if I could summarize that, you really want kind of a breakdown of what we're seeing in actions taken by more liberal or Democratic attorney generals against the administration. And you know what's amazing to me, and every once in a while I'll rib them. It's amazing to me how my fellow Democrat attorney generals all of a sudden found this fond love of federalism. It's the most amazing thing, right? And so I think the trick is of course we're standing behind the president, we're standing behind the administration, we're making sure that we are like his blocking and tackling guys. Instead of suing, now we're playing defense. But I'm a guy that always believes that the glass is absolutely half full, because I have faith in God, right? And so I look for ways to try to take those opportunities to turn it on them. Look, if they want to increase and strengthen our federalism laws, then we're going to take that opportunity to do that while defending the administration, right? But we're not going to be hypocritical about it. If we're going to have federalism, we're going to have federalism, and we're not going to let California dictate what federalism looks like, okay? I mean it. I mean, it's just, we're not going to let them control it. So yes, we have a team. The Republican attorney generals have been just great. They are some of the greatest men and women that I really have worked with, and their staffs. I just can't tell you enough. It's just a great bunch of people. Oh, are y'all getting ready to throw me off the stage? I just want you to know, Carl, I texted Steve and said, give me about 10 more minutes. No.
Yeah. So just one more question, sir. Look, what about the national security implications of this? We know Google is cooperating with China to build a social credit system in China. They have firewalls in China. So if they're cooperating with China on that level, and we know that China definitely does not want President Trump to be the president after 2020, surely there's grounds for national security, investigations into the upper reaches of Google and what they're doing with foreign governments.
Yes, I'm glad you brought up, it was part of a little note I'd made. Social credits. How many of y'all have read the story on social credit? Okay, if you haven't, look it up. I hate to tell you to Google it. You can Bing it, or you can... or you can DuckDuckGo it. But I'm going to tell you right now, that is where they're going. That is what I mean about them operating a shadow government. They want to be able, and the sad part is, there's no quid pro quo here. The amount of information they're taking from you and then monetizing that information is unfair to you as the consumer, is my belief. Because we don't know what and unfortunately the consumer is kind of, they're just at loss with that. But that's where they're going with it. They're going to take that information, and if they do it with books already. We're already seeing that. I mean, it scares me to death where we've seen them suppress conservative content on books that they're selling, right, and promoting others. I mean, that is not what this country was founded upon. And so that is an absolute concern. And when it goes over into the foreign governments, you're right. All I can tell you is that we have to take action. We started already. We've got a group of attorney generals. It's a bipartisan group. I know there's some stress in that particular direction, but it's a place to start. And we welcome any ideas or any help in taking it in any particular direction. And we would urge you all to urge your members of Congress, including Steve when he gets here, to take that immunity away from them and let us settle it in the best place where regulatory relief is, and that is our court system.
The one thing that it seems like you and other attorney generals are already pursuing is an antitrust action. And I think some of these giants like Google, Facebook, they've gone far beyond any other antitrust violator in our history. So maybe that's one way to break it up. But Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act really prevents all of us from suing these tech giants.
That's it.
And that needs to be repealed.
That's the one.
That was
Section 230.
That was given at a time when they were neutral providers, and they're no longer neutral providers. But then finally, there's something else besides repealing 230 and doing an antitrust, and that is it's broader than the tech giants. Like, for example, Norton Security Software, owned by Symantec, which owns LifeLock. You put that on there for antivirus, and they will censor information without your knowledge of groups that are listed, for example, on the SPLC hate group. So people will not get that even though they never indicated that. Credit card companies are literally discontinuing organizations because they're on the SPLC list. Discover and Diners are stopping credit card transactions, even if I have a Discover and I want to give a contribution or purchase something from you, but you're on the hate list. Discover will block my own personal transaction because they put you on a hate list. So it's a much broader thing than just the tech giants, and some other third action or third area needs to be addressed.
Absolutely, and I see my great friend Steve Scalise is here. What a great guy! I'm telling you, it's unbelievable. I mean, we love him. You kicking me off before I answer that? Yeah, that's okay.
Yes, sir, I am. That's exactly right.
I will kick. My time has expired, but thank you so very much. Appreciate it.
It's not often a lieutenant gets to kick a general off the stage. It is a real honor to welcome Steve Scalise as our next speaker. He represents the 1st Congressional District of Louisiana. He was elected to Congress in 2008 after serving in the state legislature from 1996 to 2008. He also serves his colleagues as the House Republican Whip, which is the second highest position in the House Republican leadership. And just weeks after he spoke to us at CNP 2 years ago, he was severely wounded at a congressional baseball practice on June 14th. Was saved by a heroic response from U.S. Capitol Police special agents and Alexandria police officers. He fought for his life, and we're thankful he has returned to us now. We talked about General Landry serving on the front line. This is a gentleman who served on the firing line. Please welcome Steve Scalise.
Thank y'all so much. Thank you, Colin. Wow. What a treat. A treat to be back at CNP. A treat to go after my dear friend Jeff Landry. I'm not just a great friend of Jeff Landry, I'm his translator. So I can, we're going to go cook that gumbo and we're going to take on them crazy socialists at the same time. And then Coach Ogeron will go Tigers. So I'll try to cut short the commentary because there is a lot to cover, and I know what Jeff's been doing here in Louisiana has been phenomenal to help put a check on liberalism in the state of Louisiana and help turn our state around. But what you're seeing in Washington is nothing short of an attempt to take down a president who is doing a phenomenal job of getting our country back on track. And just today, look at what just happened today. You will never read about this in the papers, by the way, but new job numbers came out. Lowest unemployment since 1969, over 130,000 new jobs created because of the great work that this president is doing, working with us when we were in the majority, and we actually cut taxes. We cut every single rate Go back and read the headlines in the days leading up to that bill passing. You had every crazy socialist that's running for president saying it was only going to benefit the rich and the poor were going to suffer. It's the same old garbage they give all the time. Look at what's happening. The lowest income levels are benefiting the most. We're rebuilding a middle class in our country that was evaporating under the 8 years of Obama. 8 straight years, and think about this, 8 straight years where every single quarter for 8 straight years we had less than 2% growth. That had never happened before in the history of our country. Not even the Great Depression did we have that anemic of an economy for that long of a period of time. And then Donald Trump comes in, he gets regulations under control, works with us to cut taxes, and now you're seeing the lowest unemployment levels in the history of our country among segments of our economy, lowest amongst African Americans, lowest amongst Hispanics. Women-owned businesses up 20% under the work that this president is doing. We ought to applaud that because it's great news, and you'll never hear about it. You'll never hear about it because the Democrats don't want this president to succeed. They said it the day he got elected. You had people talking about impeachment the day President Trump took the oath of office. Make no mistake, what this is about, what you're seeing in Washington, it's not about quid pro quo or collusion. They promised all that stuff for years. Remember Adam Schiff? Your good friend who's out there leading the charge for this crazy 3-ring circus. He is literally the ringleader of this kangaroo court that Nancy Pelosi is setting up to impeach a president where, number one, they started a process for the first time ever to impeach a president without laying out a single high crime or misdemeanor. Only 3 times in the history of our country has Congress embarked upon proceedings to impeach a president. Only 3 times in the history of our country. And every single time it started with a vote in the House to legitimize it, to set up a process where both sides had the equal opportunity to go in and subpoena witnesses. They're not even giving this president the ability to question witnesses, to bring up his own witnesses. They're literally setting up a kangaroo court because they don't want the facts out there. Again, they promised, Adam Schiff himself promised, for 2 years that he had more than circumstantial evidence that there was collusion. Those were his quotes. More than circumstantial evidence. And then the Mueller report comes out after 2 years of that investigation, and there's not a single charge brought forward. There's not any collusion that's laid out. And oh, by the way, if he had that more than circumstantial evidence, he would have shown it. You know that if there was a media that was out there calling balls and strikes equally on both sides, when they ask people like me those tough questions that they ought to ask me, they would have asked him those same tough questions. Hey, Chairman Schiff, where's your more than circumstantial evidence? Where is it? It doesn't exist. It never did exist. But he went around saying it for 2 years. And then at the end of that, no circumstantial evidence. What does he do? Do they say, okay, we were wrong, we lied to the American public? No. They turn around and just lay out more baseless accusations. And they keep throwing stuff at the wall and see if it sticks. You had this so-called whistleblower, which, by the way, interestingly, literally days before the whistleblower filed their complaint, the standard used to be a whistleblower, you had to have first-hand knowledge of something that was done illegally. First-hand knowledge. And literally days before, coincidentally, somebody changed the standard so that you could have second-hand knowledge to be considered a whistleblower. Gee whiz, do you think they don't want us to find out who actually made that change? We still haven't gotten an answer to that question. There are a lot of questions that we need answers to about this whole thing. They said it was going to be quid pro quo, because that's what the so-called whistleblower said, who incidentally talked to Adam Schiff's committee before they filed the complaint. A lawyer, let's find out who those lawyers were. Historically, when somebody files a whistleblower complaint, they don't go get lawyered up with Democrat Party lawyers. A Joe Biden donor is lawyering up this so-called whistleblower. Oh, wow, what a coincidence that is. So when you see these great economic numbers, make no mistake, and some of them have already said this, it's not about 2016. They don't want us to investigate what happened in 2016. The 2016 interference with Russia trying to interfere with our elections, it happened. We pointed out it happened before they did. But who was president when Russia was trying to interfere with our elections in 2016? It was Barack Obama. Why did Barack Obama let Russia try to interfere with our elections? Well, I'm glad that Donald Trump is trying to get to the bottom of that. They don't want Donald Trump to get to the bottom of it. They keep saying, oh, it's about 2020. They're right. They're making it about 2020 because they don't want Donald Trump to get reelected in 2020, and they're trying to use this kangaroo court, anything they can, to hold on to power, to stop Donald Trump from getting reelected. Because they see what's happening. They see how conservative policies are actually working to get our country back on track. This move to socialism is no mistake. When you see what's happening over there, when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker the last time, she had a 4-year run from 2006 to 2010. And boy, did they wreck the economy in that 4 years, especially the 2 years they had Obama. Jeff Landry was there during some of that and was in the middle of some of those fights. And you saw in just a short period of time, in 2 years, they passed out of the House cap and trade to wreck our energy economy. They passed the stimulus bill to rack up $1 trillion in debt. They passed the Dodd-Frank bill. You remember that bill? After the big meltdown on Wall Street, instead of going after the people on Wall Street, they went after our local community banks who had nothing to do with the meltdown with Dodd-Frank and crushed community banks. You're seeing smaller banks get eaten up by bigger banks now because they can't comply with 10,000 pages of regulations without hiring attorneys instead of people that can go and close loans. You can't even close loans on a small business that you used to know and work with for 3-4 generations anymore because of Dodd-Frank. And then, of course, they came with the mother lode, and that was their move towards a single-payer health care system, which was Obamacare. And they passed that. And then ultimately, they lost the House because of such a radical shift. But back in those days, Nancy Pelosi was the standard bearer for the left. She was a traditional San Francisco liberal and by far the most left. And you had all these, these people that were so-called moderates that were voting for liberal policies, and a lot of them got beat. And we got the majority back. And then lo and behold, you look at where they are now after last year's election. Nancy Pelosi is a moderate in her party. Now, Nancy Pelosi has not changed a bit. She's still a San Francisco liberal, but she's in the middle. And it's AOC and these far-left socialist anti-Semites on the left that are driving their party. And so when Nancy Pelosi is a moderate because she's a San Francisco liberal, that tells you how far their party has moved. And think about the policies. Okay, so you've seen some of the things that they moved out of the House. They've moved bills in their first few months to go after the First Amendment, to after the Second Amendment. I'm waiting for them to file a bill to allow troops to be quartered in your house to go after the Third Amendment. But they had a bill on the floor that brought the ACLU and National Right to Life together to oppose their bill because it went after the First Amendment. I mean, this is how far radical they are. It's hard to unite the ACLU and National Right to Life. And she did it. And then they went after the Second Amendment rights. And think about this, because I'm very passionate about this. The Second Amendment was put in place because originally our founding fathers didn't think they needed to put into our Constitution some kind of protection on our rights to bear arms because they thought it was an inherent right. They talked about it as an inherent right for self-defense, not just for the military, but for individuals in their homes to have the right to protect themselves. And later they saw threats on gun rights, and so they put the Second Amendment into the Bill of Rights. And here you see Democrats trying to chip away at it every single day. It scares me to think that before President Trump got in office, you had the Heller case. There was a case that moved all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court that decided the question of whether or not the Second Amendment means you have a right to bear arms in your house or you can only have firearms if you're in the military. Do you know the Supreme Court got it right? They actually said the Second Amendment means you as an individual have a right to bear arms. It's not just the militia, not just the military. Do you know that was a 5-4 decision? Literally one vote different. And if Donald Trump wasn't elected president, you had the Scalise seat open. Scalia was on the right side of that decision. Imagine if Hillary Clinton's pick was on the court when they decided is the Second Amendment meaning that you have the right to bear arms yourself. 5-4 decision. Don't think the Supreme Court's not part of why they're going after this guy, because there may be more picks coming up down the road. But you look at what Donald Trump's done with the 2 picks he's had. How phenomenal has he done? Maybe the 2 best picks to a Supreme Court that we've ever seen in terms of people putting people on the court that actually believe in the Constitution the way it was written. Not, gee whiz, they couldn't get elected to Congress. Well, why go to Congress if you can just go to the Supreme Court and write law? I mean, that's what some of those people believe in. And so you've seen the president realign the court. You've seen the president get the regulatory state, all these crazy federal agencies that would wake up every day and they would go after businesses and try to take down our ability to make things in America. We couldn't manufacture in America anymore. And then you look at where we are today. I mean, here in South Louisiana, I get to represent the hub of the deep water drilling operations in the Gulf of Mexico. You see what we're doing in drilling in the Gulf with the fracking that's going on, not just in Louisiana and Texas, but all across the country. They're fracking and making energy in Pennsylvania right next door to New York, where they're blocking the ability to move it through pipelines. And so these crazy liberals, and I know everybody was disappointed when whoever the de Blasio guy got out of the presidential race. I don't know if y'all knew he was running for president. The people in New York wanted him to stay running for president because he's wrecking the city of New York. But he's back now over there because he didn't catch any traction. But they're trying to use laws in the state of New York, to block the ability to move some of that energy to the Northeast. And so think about how liberalism really works in practice. So they say they hate energy. Now, all these people that are touting the Green New Deal, you got to love this, okay? AOC, y'all all heard of AOC now. She's literally, 2 years ago, she was a bartender. Now she's the thought leader for the Democrat Party. She's literally driving the debate. And so she comes out with this crazy idea that, in 10 years, you won't have fossil fuels, you won't have airplanes, you won't miss a flight again, you won't have to worry about what to order on the menu because there won't be any cows anymore. They really believe in this, except that they don't practice what they preach. So AOC and all these other liberals, every presidential candidate on the left, by the way, has now embraced the Green New Deal. Well, my question to them is this. Number one, I don't think fossil fuels are immoral. I think you actually allow a higher standard of living. You allow a lower cost of emissions. We emit less, by the way, than some of these phony countries in Europe who tell us to sign the Paris Accord. And do you know that not one country in Europe is in compliance with the Paris Accord? France, where Paris is not even in compliance with the Paris Accord. And then they want us to wreck our economy by signing on to it. And Donald Trump said, we're getting out of this crazy deal, this phony deal, and we're going to manufacture in America. We're going to bring jobs back to America. And oh, by the way, we emit less carbon. We are reducing our carbon emissions through technology, through innovation. And all these countries, all those jobs would go to Brazil and China and India, who emit more carbon if you followed the Green New Deal and these crazy ideas they have. But I don't think fossil fuels are immoral, but they say they do. So my question to them is, if you really do believe it's immoral, why do you fly on planes that aren't equipped with solar panels? Why are you not riding around in bicycles? And does your Prius just plug into a tree? Where do you get the energy from? You don't even believe in nuclear power. It's hypocrisy what they're touting. They're literally trying to wreck our economy and lower our standard of living and increase carbon emissions. Because the jobs that go to China and India, they're exempt from all of these Kyoto treaties and Paris Accords, and they emit 4 or 5 times more carbon to make the same stuff we do. We've got to call them out on this stuff. We've got to confront them on this stuff. We shouldn't run and hide as conservatives from the things we believe in versus what they believe in. This is a fight for the future of our country, and we all have to be engaged, whether it's healthcare policy, immigration policy, gun control, where they're trying to take the rights away from us to have guns. And you look at what happened. You look at what happened in my shooting. You look at what happened in so many of these other tragedies. When they had El Paso and Dayton just a few weeks ago, what did the first thing that you saw Pelosi and all these other liberals do? My first thought is to pray for the victims. Yeah, let's find out what happened. The facts would be nice to know. But the first thought ought to be to pray for the victims. What kind of person, when they see a tragedy, the first thing they think of is, where can they run to find a camera to tout their political legislation? And so Pelosi said, Mitch McConnell needs to call the Senate back in from recess to pass her bill. First of all, go read her bill. Her bill would have done nothing to stop those shootings. It would have done nothing to stop Parkland or Charleston. Enforcement of existing laws would have. If you would have had some of these agencies like the FBI, who are, instead of out there running around trying to undermine President Trump when he was a candidate for president, people at the FBI were doing that. They had a file on the Parkland shooter. Twice where people said, this kid's going to be a school shooter. He himself said he was going to be a school shooter, and they didn't do anything with it. And so their answer is to go and take away your rights to have guns. How about you hold the people accountable who didn't do their job when the law actually would have stopped him from committing the crime? We can't yield to the crazy stuff they're trying to do to undermine our values, and they're doing it every day. They're doing it in Washington right now with this impeachment hoax. It's been a hoax from the beginning. Al Green, the only Democrat in Congress who filed articles of impeachment, was on TV last week saying, if we don't impeach the president, he will get reelected. Now imagine if a Republican would have said that about Barack Obama, which none of us did, by the way. But that's what it's all, it's about stopping him from getting reelected. It's not about charges. They never had any charges of high crimes and misdemeanors. That's the standard in the Constitution. And our founders worried about this power that they gave Congress because they didn't want it to become a political tool. And yet Nancy Pelosi is making it a political tool, not even bringing a vote to the House floor to start a formal inquiry where you actually have both sides having equal ability to get information. You know, ultimately, if they move it through the House and they have a vote, she's not going to be able to shield her vulnerable members, many of whom are in Trump-won districts who are going to have to go back home, and are home right now, by the way, getting their tail kicked because they can't answer those questions about fairness. And they're pointing, first they pointed to the Ukraine, and then they found out, oh, gee whiz, it was Joe Biden who did, quid pro Joe. I mean, he went over there and he said, hey, I'm leaving in 6 hours if you don't fire the prosecutor, and I've got the $1 billion. And oh, by the way, again, I know the media's climbing over themselves to ask this question. Has anybody asked Barack Obama if Joe Biden was authorized to go over there and withhold the $1 billion unless the prosecutor, who just so happened to be looking into his son, was fired? Has anyone asked that question? I've never heard it asked. They ask me questions like, gee whiz, don't you think it's wrong that the president did this or that? I said, first of all, the president has an obligation to root out corruption. There was corruption in the Ukraine. This new president, Zelensky, got elected to root out corruption. It was a surprise victory because there are a lot of crooks over there. There was, by the way, a lot, and I did Chuck Todd on Meet the Press, and this is great. First he has Adam Schiff on. And boy, it's like softball after, gee whiz, Chairman Schiff, if you don't get everything you need, what will you do to get the president to comply? This is after the president released the transcript. Unprecedented. And that was after them saying it was going to be quid pro quos and all that. And you read the transcript, and it's two guys congratulating each other, talking about corruption. And Chuck Todd goes, well, what, right there where he said, do me a favor, and he talked about Joe Biden. And I said, Chuck, have you read the transcript? If you read the transcript, the section where the president says, will you do me a favor, he talks about CrowdStrike. Now, CrowdStrike is the company at the heart of a lot of the investigation into the 2016 corruption with Hillary Clinton, not Joe Biden. And he, by the way, when they were going after him in the Mueller investigation, he was trying to get to the bottom of what really happened with the Russian collusion with somebody. It wasn't with Trump. And so CrowdStrike is at the heart of this, and because you can't go get Hillary's server anymore because she bleached it and beat it with a hammer and let an alligator eat it in the bayous of South Louisiana or something. You can't find the thing. But there is some server that some people have reported is in Ukraine, because CrowdStrike is a Ukrainian company that was in the middle of looking into how Hillary Clinton's server got hacked by the Russians. And so the president's trying to find out, how did the Russians try to interfere with our election? I'm glad he's looking into that. I thought the media cared about the Russian investigation and the Russian interference with our election until all of a sudden they realized maybe Joe Biden had something to do with it. So anyway, we have got to stand together, focus on the facts, let people know what they're trying to do to stop this president from getting reelected. That is what this is all about. For President Trump, it's about finding out what happened in 2016. For the Democrats, it's about trying to stop Donald Trump from getting reelected in 2020. Y'all know what's at stake. I mean, my goodness, born alive. We have a bill to say if a baby is born alive after it's born outside the womb, this is not even an abortion debate anymore. And Democrats want to allow the right for states like New York and Virginia and others to kill the baby and call that abortion. It's murder. If a baby's born alive outside the womb, it's murder, and it ought to be federally protected. And we have that bill. We will bring that bill to the floor when we get the opportunity. That's what's at stake. Y'all know this. But every now and then, it's good to be reminded of the facts, because you watch the TV and you see what's going on in Washington, and it's literally a three-ring circus that Pelosi's running because she doesn't want the facts to get out. So anyway, I thank you. I don't know if we have time for questions, but I just love what CNP stands for, what all of you do to fight in various different areas of the conservative movement. So great to be with you.
The way we're going to do questions is Steve DeCaspers and Trey Miller, where's Trey, have microphones on either side of the room, alternate between the two of them, and we'll begin with Bishop Jackson. Thank you, Trey.
Congressman, first of all, God bless you, and thank you for your courage. Thank you.
Thank you. He
For
has.
not quitting and not giving up. I'm a talk show host with American Family Radio, and I'm hearing from callers all over the country that they are a little frustrated sometimes with Republicans because what you've just described is on the verge of insanity. And that Republicans don't seem to be as forthright in calling this stuff out for what it is. I mean, socialism, well, I mean, that's really communism. You can't really distinguish between the two. And so are we doing an adequate job of alerting the American people that this is not business as usual or a policy debate, but really two conflicting worldviews on who we are and where we're going as a nation?
Absolutely. It's government control versus freedom. That is what is going to be at stake next year. They don't want Donald Trump to be that person. We always can be doing more. You're never going to get a fair shot out of the mainstream media. And again, I mean, I go on a lot of shows. I'll do a lot of Fox, but I'll go on MSNBC. I made Chris Matthews almost fall out of his chair one time because when you call truth to them, they never hear it because they have people on their shows that just, they all spew all this garbage, lies, innuendos. Nobody calls them on it, so they're used to that. And when you go and speak facts, they literally go nuts and they yell at you and you yell back. But we have to keep doing it. We have to push back. But I will tell you this. The ultimate check and balance on the media is what Donald Trump does on Twitter. It's why they hate him tweeting. But next year, you will have a presidential election, and they're going to fight it out on the crazy left, and somebody like Elizabeth Warren is going to be their nominee. It's going to be a true believing socialist, communist, but somebody that really does think government should control every aspect of your life. And there is no better person to go up against whoever that socialist is going to be than Donald Trump. And he's got a great story to tell. I can't wait for those debates. We ought to charge money for those debates on pay-per-view and pay down the national debt. It will raise billions of dollars.
Thank you for being here. I want to second what Bishop Jackson said. We all owe you a debt of gratitude, and we're praying for your health and safety.
And thanks for the prayers. Prayers really matter, even if some people on the left don't want to pray. I appreciated the prayers, and we all need to keep doing that.
I'm Jerome Corsi, and I had the 40 hours with Mueller. And I can tell you that everything they're doing is fraudulent. It's set up from the beginning. This whistleblower, I'm sure, was recruited, has a history, probably at the NSA. You need to research who he is. But it's all staged. When I finally told Mueller I would not, they could put me in prison the rest of my life, but I was not going to lie to give them the narrative they wanted because it wasn't true, and I wouldn't. But the point is, I think it's happening again. And in Congress, we've got to really speak out because we're not going to get a forum in due process. CrowdStrike, by the way, also in Ukraine had a fraudulent report that the Russians had put GPS software in the artillery of the Ukrainians when they were fighting Russia, and that Russia wiped out a large portion of their artillery. Russia did not wipe out a large portion of their artillery, and the malware did not have GPS data in it. CrowdStrike had to withdraw that report. And when Trump says the server is in Ukraine, he's talking about the Ukrainian computer and CrowdStrike and its interference in Ukraine. These kind of points need to be made. But thank you for your courage. God bless you, and we are all praying for you.
Thank you. You're spot on.
Congressman?
Yeah.
Richard Viguerie, all due respect, I don't think you really answered Bishop Jackson's question. The grassroots is furious with the silence of the Republican leaders. And we hear you defend the president, but we don't hear your colleagues. The grassroots is angry at the silence of the Republican leaders defending our president. Would you speak to that, please?
Yeah, and clearly I'm doing a lot of media, a lot more than normal with this, and we have to because we have to get the facts out because the barrage, it's amazing to see how the left is unified around this because they thought Mueller was going to be it. And so they were disappointed with the Mueller report, but they didn't stop. So this, they think, is now their next thing. And so they're frothing at the mouth. And so we have to push back aggressively because they're being very aggressive. They're being very fast and loose with the facts. We've got to stick to the facts. Yesterday, I held a call with my whip team. I've got a group of about 70 members of the House, Republicans, that are the most engaged in pushing back. And so I wanted to talk to my whip team to let them know we've got to, number one, have the facts. Everybody needs to know every detail because they'll throw innuendo out there that's not true, and you need to know all the background. You need to know about CrowdStrike. You need to know about all of the different components to this. The fact that the president, they talked on the call, Zelensky, about the Javelin missiles. President Trump is the one who sold the Javelin missiles. You know, there's no quid pro quo. He sold it to him early off. Barack Obama would not sell him the Javelin missiles. And keep in mind, when you got Russian tanks coming in, the only thing that's going to stop a Russian tank is a missile that blows up a tank, and we're the only ones that sell them. You can't get them on Amazon. You have to get permission from the president. And Obama wouldn't give them permission. Again, I'm sure they're asking that question. Why wouldn't Obama sell them the Javelins? Trump did. No quid pro quo. He's like, yeah, of course I'll sell you these missiles to stop Russia from coming in, pushing back on Russian aggression. So you've got to have all this background. I'm urging more members to get out there. You know, I can't tell you why people don't, go out in bigger droves. I was in Ohio a couple of days ago with Jim Jordan. He and I were talking about, you see Jim out there very aggressively. So we do have parts of our leadership team that are very aggressively getting out there. We need more. And some people are reluctant to go on some of these very liberal shows because you're not treated fairly. I don't care about not being treated fairly. You grow up as a Republican. I'm a Reagan Republican. I registered to vote as a Republican when I was a student at LSU, and I knew from day one I had professors, that were just far left liberal even back then. And so you just know it's part of the gig. If you're going to be a Republican, you're going to be attacked, and that's okay. You just go back at them with facts. If you go back at them with facts, you will always rule the day. But you have to have the facts. And so I encourage more of our members to get out there, and hopefully we see more of that happening. But I understand, and I've heard that too. That's why I passed that on and held a call with my whip team yesterday to say we've got to all be out there fighting with the facts. Know the facts first. Don't go out there and think you can wing it, because they're going to throw things at you that are false. And if you don't know that it's false, you're going to be in a bad spot because they're going to ask you to answer hypotheticals that aren't true. You have to have the facts because they don't always use them.
Congressman, I think I'm over here, sir.
Yes.
In the back. Frank Gaffney with the Center for Security Policy. Welcome to CNP. You are a leader in the Congress on energy security. You come from a state that is one of the driving forces behind
energy
the transformation of our country's energy security posture. And yet, as you've indicated in your remarks, the Squad and now the Democratic Party and an awful lot of other people, including little girls from Sweden, are cavilling about the need for us to dismantle our energy security posture. I wanted to say that it seems to me you can't beat something with nothing. And I wanted to present a colleague of mine here, Andrew Whitney, to you. He'll be speaking later in the course of the program, but he has been doing some extraordinarily interesting work as an investor in developing an alternative to the so-called Green New Deal. I think it might be called a real deal. And we'd love to make sure that you're apprised of what the elements of it are that don't cost the taxpayer a dime and yet can greatly enhance our energy security posture.
Yeah, well, I'd love to get with you after, because I put together what's called the HEAT team, the House Energy Action Team, to go combat some of the garbage that they put out about energy, because we crushed them on energy policy. Again, you've got to know the facts. You've got to know not just that we're for all of the above energy, but also how we're actually making our environment better. The conservation side of this is important because they think they have the moral high ground, because they don't think anybody's going to challenge them on this global warming hypocrisy that they talk about, as if we can pass some bill in Congress that's going to change the temperature of the earth. I mean, for God's sake, when they brought Obamacare, they spent $500 million and couldn't build a website to take your order for health care. You got a couple of kegs of beer and college students, and you could get the thing done for about $500. But I mean, they keep. If you look at energy policy, here's a place where we can crush them. I did CBS News. We're talking about going into places that Republicans aren't used to going into. So I went and did CBS News one morning, and we get into energy policy. The guy throws out this thing. He goes, "Oh, gee whiz, how can you come from a state and a district that's with rising sea levels? Your district's going to go away. How can you support drilling?" And I said, well, first of all, in Louisiana, The reason that we're losing land is because of carting off the Mississippi River with levees where you don't have the sediment that used to build that ground. So understand the ecology and how we got here, but at the same time, we use royalties from drilling to rebuild our coast. It's a great conservational model for the country. And he looks at me and he's like, are you going to tell me that drilling is helping rebuild land? I said, yeah, come on down to Louisiana. I'll show you how we do it. They have no clue what they're talking about. And so you got to call them on this stuff. And we do. I went on The View. You want to talk about a fun day for a Republican. You know, Whoopi Goldberg is over there, and she thinks she's got me on the Second Amendment. You know, you were shot. How can you support guns? I'm like, do you know there's people with guns that saved my life? And every single day, somebody with a gun saves their life or somebody else's life, and we don't talk about it. And it went really well in the end, but you got to confront them with the facts, and ultimately they do back down because they don't have facts on their side. And so they throw stuff out there and they try to make it emotional, and you can't let them have the moral high ground on this stuff. We are making people's lives better, not just in America, but around the world. Think about this with energy. So who's standing up to Russia? Russia uses energy as a weapon all around the world. And so now here in Louisiana, President Trump came down a few months ago to South Louisiana, went and saw a $10 billion facility that is exporting liquefied natural gas. Do you know that we already have contracts in place for over 20 years with our friends in Europe, Eastern Europe especially, and Asia, where now they don't have to get their energy from Russia. They can get it from a friend. We don't put strings attached to it like Russia does. And so it helps our trade balance, it helps our economy, we grow jobs, and geopolitically it helps our friends around the world. And you saw in the Strait of Hormuz, you see tankers being seized by Iran because of what we're doing. President Trump, by the way, standing up to Iran, standing up to North Korea, standing up to China, and standing up to Russia, and it's working. They blow up one of the major refineries in Saudi Arabia. 20 years ago, you would have seen oil prices spike over $120 a barrel. Today, it's hovering between $45 and $55 consistently because we now are the dominant energy supplier in the world, and we are a country that's not a volatile place in the world. This is how energy saves lives. So we need to keep talking about this. I think we got the hook. Well, thank you all again for what y'all do. Y'all get those facts out there too. Let's go fight this thing, and then let's go win next year so we can keep saving this great country. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will reconvene in the main ballroom at 11:45, but let's have one more round of applause for both General Landry and Steve Scalise, Congressman Scalise. And as you go on into the weekend, talk to your friends who are regular members of CNP and tell them what they're missing by not being part of the Board of Governors. Get them to move up a notch. Thank you very much. Have a great day.